Unison is one of the modes of the voice multiplier. These modes are exclusive. Unison adds more voices to each key that is played, making the sound bigger. I've loaded this sound source. Now I'll turn Unison on so we can hear the difference. The detune slider controls how much the additional voices are detuned compared to the original. This control is modulatable. Fine and coarse control the range of the detune slider. When set to fine, it sounds like this. When set to coarse, the detune range is wider, and as the slider reaches its maximum level, the voices are tuned an octave or a fifth apart from the original, depending on how many voices are added. These buttons control how many octaves apart and in which direction the additional voices are added when compared to the original. Depth controls how many voices are added. This control is also modulatable. Now keep in mind that more voices use more CPU power. Spread controls how the additional voices are spread in the stereo field. At this position, they're placed in the center. And at this position, they're spread to the sides. Now, I'll turn on the filter section, enable the arpeggiator, and let's compare how this sounds with and without Unison. Cool. Now as you can hear, Unison works great when applied to samples. So let's go over how it works when applied to synth oscillators. When using Unison with synth oscillators, all these controls work in the same way as in sample mode. There is an extra parameter, however, that's exclusive to synth oscillators, and that is the phase control. When using synth oscillators, the initial phases of the voices are randomly spread across a range, and the width of that range is controlled by the position of the phase control. I'm going to bring the detune slider down and set the phase of all the voices in sync, which is at this position. These settings produce results that sound like digital synthesizers. Now, I'll set the phase of the voices to be spread as much as possible, which is at this position, and this will result in a more analog type sound. When using Unison with synth oscillators, the analog knob in the main section introduces pitch and phase inconsistencies, both to the main and the Unison voices. As the analog knob is set to higher values, you'll hear that the tuning of each voice is different on each keystroke. So now I'll set the Unison detune to coarse and the slider to the maximum setting. In this case, the inconsistencies introduced by the analog knob will be more pronounced. Okay, now let's try something else. Let's check out how to create the THX effect used in the patch Tear Your Head Off from episode 1. Detune should be in coarse mode. The depth should be at its maximum, and if you're using a synth oscillator, the phase of all the voices should be synced. Then it's just a matter of moving the detune slider from its minimum to its maximum to get the effect. I've MIDI learned it using the mod wheel on my keyboard, so let's try it. Cool. Unison in Omnisphere offers many unique parameters that make it really flexible. That and the fact that it can be applied to sample-based or synth oscillators opens enormous possibilities for creating new sounds.